All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining today. We're going to take 1 or 2 more minutes, let everybody else finish logging in, and then we will get started. Dr. James, are you ready?
Yes, sir, Jake.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jake McKenzie. I'm the president and CEO of Intermark Group, and with me today is Dr. James McFarland, our staff behavioral scientists, people scientists, we like to say around here. And we've got an exciting topic that we're going to cover today about keeping your customers engaged and the importance of that. But as always, we're going to start with a little bit about Intermark. Intermark is the nation's largest psychology-driven marketing group. We're headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, have offices in Atlanta and South Florida as well. We are privileged to be able to work with some of the coolest, most fun, and most importantly, most successful brands in America in terms of driving outcomes. And what they all have in common is they've been leveraging the behavioral sciences to get better marketing outcomes. With that, we're going to give you a little bit of a dose of how we apply the behavioral sciences to marketing. And today, the special topic is really around engagement. Now, we started this, and Dr. James really started this. Let's understand what CMOs are thinking. What are the topics that they want to hear about that are pressing for them? And so we did what I think is a fairly exhaustive study of all the existing surveys that touch CMOs. And what was the thing that you found that jumped off the page, James?
Yeah, well, across quite a few different studies and over 80 different, industry leaders, they noticed there were some definite trends that we found amongst each of these interviews. And one, first off, getting noticed, attracting attention. It's getting more and more difficult over time. Boosting pipeline metrics, increasing conversions, retention, ARPUs, things you might think of. Budgets were a big concern, managing these limited budgets and then maximizing these ROIs. As well as the advent of AI and machine learning. So all these industry leaders are now more focused on using AI and machine learning to their best benefit and moving forward in 2024.
And one of the topics that seemed to be consistent was this notion of needing to have stronger customer relationships. Specifically, how do we keep customers engaged? And all of those things you mentioned kind of overlay within that broader topic. Now, the importance of customer engagement is probably self-evident, but there are some studies that really accentuate this. For instance, a 5% lift in customer engagement can increase the net profit of a company anywhere between 25 and 98%. It means you can almost double your net profit if we can get a mild increase in customer engagement. The reason is fairly straightforward. It's because highly engaged customers spend 38% more with companies that they're highly engaged with. They spend more per transaction by a very substantial amount. And perhaps as important, they have a much, much higher retention rate. So the importance of keeping our customers engaged and loyal is massive in terms of ROI for an entity. So as marketers, I can see why it's on the list. The question is, how do we use marketing to create more engagement, to create more loyalty? And we have to start with overcoming one of the core problems that all humans face, right, James?
Exactly. 2024, more than ever, cognitive overload is like a daily occurrence for everyone. This is when individuals are presented with more information than their cognitive system can actually handle at once. I'm not sure if you've seen the meme that when I get older, I have to turn down the radio to see better. And it's kind of, it's funny, but it's also true. Neuroscience actually shows that it's literally true. We can only have so much incoming information into our brain that we can handle at one time. And yes, a little quick tip, if you turn down the radio, it will help you see better because our brain doesn't discriminate between different types of electrons that's moving around in there. And so, but that's what's happening in 2024 and consumers today. They're bombarded with constant information from all different angles. And cognitive overload is a very real thing. Leaving attention is literally today's most prized and valued resource. Um, consumers, now you may have heard that our attention span is shrinking, and that's not necessarily true. I mean, the correct answer is nuanced. But what's really happening is people are getting better at not paying attention to the things that they don't care about and only paying attention to things that they really care about. They're getting better at filtering through all the noise and say, nope, noise, 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 and then zeroing in on what they're actually interested in. So,
Uh, yeah, that's right. And one might say this is the fundamental problem of marketers generally, but particularly when it comes to ongoing customer engagement, while somebody is not actively shopping for us, how do we break through that and get their attention and keep their attention? And it happens both before the purchase, during the purchase, and after the purchase. We're going to break down the two topics into 6 different psychological principles, one around better engagement and one around loyalty. Let's start with customer engagement. How do we keep people engaged? And we'll start with the most simple of marketing answers, the exposure effect, and we'll get into how to amplify that. So give me in super brief terms, what is mere exposure effect?
well, in super brief terms, yes. The more often you see something, the more you like it, is in the simplest terms. I mean, they've done some really fun studies, like they just have people like wander into a classroom and then wander out. And at the end of the semester, they ask this person, ask the whole class, well, what do you think of this person? And they like the person. They can't name them, they don't know who they are, but they say, I like that person, even though they have no clue who that person is, just simply
You know,
by having seen them.
and as a dad, I will tell you I've tried this in different areas, including with food. If my kids claim they don't like a food, as long as we continue serving it, after about 7 different exposures, they will begin eating it and then eventually claim that they really like it. It's because we like things that we are routinely exposed to. And it is important to note there's no upper limit to this. We will get tired of a piece of creative, but we don't get tired of hearing from a message of a company. So continuing to have regular exposure. And you think about the brands that are the most beloved in America, and often they're some of the kings of that exposure. I know you talk a lot about Coca-Cola, just how ubiquitous they have been over the last 100+ years, even up to today. Anywhere and everywhere you turn that you might be thinking about refreshment, Coca-Cola has inserted themselves in everything. We're in the holiday season, and it's easy to remember that Santa wears a red suit in part because Coca-Cola wanted him to wear a red suit. Because that was part of their brand colors. And so the exposure effect is unbelievably powerful. And you probably know that, so we're not going to dwell on it, but it's important to remember you got to keep marketing. You can't keep your customers engaged if they don't hear from you. The second principle, though, is somewhat related to that, and that's we need omni-channel marketing. There's an amplification effect when they hear similar messages from different vehicles. So it's not just, hey, we got a successful TV campaign, but also they're hearing from us in social media, product placement, the types of packaging that we receive, and every other channel. And this is often a fall down piece of marketing because marketing becomes fragmented. You got somebody else running your website, somebody else doing your mobile app, somebody else doing your advertising, and it ceases to be a seamless experience. And I know you love to talk about what an amazing job Apple does with being omni-channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, no matter where you go, whether it's their store, their website, the social media, or even their packaging, it all kind of carries that same brand simplicity and ease of use that comes along with it. So, yeah.
I found a place full of charms, wondrous place.
And what they've done is they've made every single interaction a brand interaction. When you get the package from Apple, even the process of opening it in a unique, simplified way that delights you with how it opens as part of their brand experience. And they're hitting you in lots of different areas, all the way down to their website, which is very on brand. It's simple. It's clean. It is obvious where to click and go next, and they don't overwhelm you with options. You want to go check out the watches? Here are 3 options. That's it. Because they seem to understand cognitive load and the need of making this simple.
Yep, exactly. Moving into 2024, Apple's ahead of the curve here. They know what the overloaded modern brain is needing.
And we have this third one. It's called the engagement effect. And it's funny to use it to answer the question of engagement, but it really has to do with mental engagement. So if I were to ask the audience the question like, hey, who is the oldest Brady child? What would you answer? Well, you probably stop and think about it and you're like, oh, I'm pretty sure it was Greg Brady. Well, what has happened here is I got you to think for a moment. I got you to access your long-term memory. You formulated an answer and you put it out into the ethosphere. And that literally made you more engaged with the content of the conversation that's going on. And that has several effects. It'll increase your affinity. And most importantly, it will increase your recall because now you're mentally present. In essence, we tricked you into thinking. So how do we leverage that in the marketing space? I want to show some very simple examples from some much smaller brands to really illustrate that you can keep people engaged even with kind of traditional advertising and marketing. This is an ad for a hospital located down here in Birmingham, Alabama, that Intermark did. The headline is very straightforward. It says, a mammogram catches things you miss, which makes you go, huh, that's weird. I need to check out again this image that's in front of me. And you lean in and you wonder, well, what am I missing? And after a moment examining it, you see, oh, wait a minute. There's a skull and crossbones that they snuck in there. Because the process of you thinking about it forces you to be engaged with it. The act of mentally engaging with it means that you have higher recall and dramatically higher levels of affinity. And there are lots of ways to keep people mentally engaged. Speaking of hospital systems, another one that our friends at Intermark did, headline here to shed some light on how the sun benefits your health. Take this light or this ad outside. They printed this on photovoltaic paper, so it changed when it was in the sun, and once you popped in the sun, you got a message. Don't you feel better? Yeah. Mentally engaging, got you to do something, and now you are engaging mentally with the ad. You are breaking through that cognitive block of being bombarded everything, and you're focusing on your interaction with this brand. So when we talk about engagement, sometimes it's very straightforward. It's be mentally engaging, have conversations, have back and forth, ask people to do something or ask people to think. And it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to make it happen. And every brand, B2B brands, B2C brands, big brands, small brands can all leverage this concept in all different areas. It just takes a little bit more thinking to figure out how you're going to do it in a compelling, differentiating way. So as we think about customer engagement, you got to keep marketing. You got to market from lots of different areas so they're hearing from you. And to keep people engaged, be engaging. Let them engage with your brand. Social media is a natural place for that. But as you can see, lots of different places that we can take advantage of it. Second, very related area, we're going to call customer loyalty, but this is also to do with engagement. We're going to cover three principles: the familiarity principle, commitment principle, and consistency principle, all having to do with how we take customers and prospective customers and make them like us more post-purchase. So let's start with the familiarity principle and talk a little bit about that. It seems obvious at first hand, James, but it's got a little more nuance.
Yeah, so familiarity, it's hard to beat the McDonald's ham. It's huge, it's yellow. You can, no matter where you see it in the world, you instantly know they've got French fries, they got hamburgers, it's McDonald's, maybe a shake or two. And so, yes, the familiarity principle, you know what to expect, you see it, it's alluring, it's inviting, and it's attractive even. So,
And there are lots of versions of familiarity principle. It has to do with what happens in our brand when we see something that we're familiar with. We kind of have that warm, fuzzy feeling of, oh yeah, I like that. You probably heard of the nostalgia effect, and that has a very similar effect of there's an existing emotional pool that we're tapping into to leverage across our brands. There was an ad with the Super Bowl 2 cycles ago that really was a great example of leveraging the nostalgia effect in completely different categories to create affinity within their category. Let's quickly take a look.
Barbie really wants this dream house. It's got stunning views and a slide.
Barbie's ready for fun.
So cool! And Barbie found out about this dream house with an alert from Rocket Homes.
She did?
Well, it's a super competitive market. Everyone wants to buy the dream house.
Better offer Betty.
I'll go 10 over asking.
Cash offer Carl.
Straight cash.
House flip for Skipper.
Let's tear it to the studs.
You vultures! You're gonna start a bidding war!
This is less than ideal.
Oh no!
Don't worry, Barbie has a verified approval that shows her finances are backed by Rocket Mortgage. So Barbie wins!
But we need a house.
Oh, I found a fixer-upper castle on Rocket Homes.
It has good bones, but really bad neighbors.
I like his vibe. Get your dream house all in one place with Rocket Homes and Rocket Mortgage. For a better way to find and finance, Rocket can.
Thanks for helping.
No problem, it's good for my glutes.
Man, you make a He-Man reference, you pulled me right in. That is totally my jam. But it really has to do with taking stock of the sort of imagery you're going to use, the turns of phrase you're going to use, the audio you're going to use, and making sure those are specifically designed to elicit emotions, leveraging familiarity, leveraging related concepts like nostalgia to generate a positive feeling. And this is a great example. Rocket Mortgage has absolutely nothing to do with Barbie Dreamhouse or He-Man toys, but they're leveraging that positive feeling, that familiarity feeling from those existing ads to create a halo effect so that you'll feel good about Rocket Mortgage. So you walk away having that warm, fuzzy feeling, and because they've made you feel something, you tie that emotion to the brand that you were just exposed to. Really quite brilliant in a way. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. Likely, if you are an existing company, you already have imagery and ideas and brand objects that are familiar to your existing customers, and being disciplined about when and how you use them to continue that concept of leveraging the familiarity principle. Talk about concept number 2 under loyalty, and that is the commitment principle. So I love to tell this story, again, probably because of my age, about this show, Let's Make a Deal. James, remember the host, Monty Hall? Well, the format of the show was pretty straightforward. They would bring somebody out of the audience, they would immediately win something, and then they would try to negotiate them out of it or barter with them. So there was this one episode that I will never forget. They brought a woman up on stage. There were 3 curtains, and he said, "Hey, pick a curtain." So she said, "Oh, I'll take curtain number 2." And lo and behold, behind it was a washing machine. So she wins a washing machine. Well, then Monty tries to talk her out of it. Well, he's been doing this a while, and I think he was kind of testing a theory. And so he leaned over and whispered in her ear, yet in the mic on air, "There's a car behind door number 3. And guess what she walked away with that day? A washing machine.
Oh,
And what's remarkable is even with perfect transparency, she stuck with her original decision. It really highlights the commitment principle. And what the commitment principle says is that once we make a decision, we stop thinking of what it should be and begin to believe that it was a brilliant decision. And that's really remarkable. Now, this has lots of implications in marketing, but also one in management. So if you were in a meeting and you have to make a decision, don't talk until everybody else in the meeting has had their say, because as soon as you open your mouth to say something, you cease to be objective because of the commitment principle. You start rooting for your idea to be the one that wins, and you lose your ability to be objective and to change your mind in essence. Now, what does this mean from a marketing standpoint? Well, number one, it means that as soon as you make a purchase decision, your brain has rewired itself to think that's brilliant. So your affinity for that product service is at the highest at the moment you choose to make the decision, and will never be higher. So if we're going to leverage high affinity, that's when to do it. But we can also leverage the same concept by tricking the brain into remaking that decision. For instance, we know that every time somebody re-engages with one of your platforms, such as online banking, they are deciding yet again to make that purchase decision. If somebody is unhappy with your product or service, the best way to change that is by getting them to make yet another purchase decision. You can do that with discounting, offers, a make good, whatever it is. We see this show up in unexpected areas as well, including mobile apps. Banks have found that once they can get you to use their mobile app, statistically, you will never change banks again. And it's because of the commitment principle. You are mentally re-engaging and remaking that decision of sticking with that purchase. So if you haven't found ways to engage your customers on an ongoing basis, it's a great way of doing it, because it dramatically increases affinity, which means they're much more likely to stay loyal. It's a great loyalty mechanism. But there's a way that we can take this point of inflection of making that positive decision and the high affinity it creates and amplify it. To that end, we're going to talk about the consistency principle. Now, the consistency principle may be my overall favorite psychological principle. And here's what it says. If I can get you to say or write something, your brain will rewire itself to think that it is true, even if what you are saying or writing you know to be false. Now, that's crazy. It has to do with our need to feel publicly consistent. And James, I know you love to talk about this. Being seen as consistent with our peers is unbelievably important to humans, right?
exactly true. Yeah. And within ourselves too, but exactly, if we make an announcement out in the world, out to public, that we're doing this thing, oh, it's so powerful. It really cements our thoughts on it for the continuation. One of the first experiments they did on this, actually, they had people put like they asked people, do you want like a big 3x5 sign in your yard? And most people said, no, of course not. Almost everyone said no. But a few people said yes to put in a little 3x5 card in their window. Now, okay, we'll do that. Well, yeah, that'll be fine. They came back 2 weeks later and said, hey, would you put a 3x5 sign now? And the people who had the little 3x5 cards said, sure, why not? I'm going to be consistent. I supported you this far. I'm going to keep on going. And because they didn't want to, it's based in cognitive dissonance. We don't want our behaviors to be at odds with our thoughts or what we've done in the past.
That's right. I actually saw a study that said the highest efficacy way of quitting smoking was getting people to write notes to people that they love, telling that they were going to quit smoking because of them. Had a much higher effectiveness rate than any of the drugs on the market. And this is because of that consistency principle. So how do we leverage this in the marketing space? Well, the answer is the most powerful tool that we have is this bad boy, the like button or the follow button. Now you're wondering, what in the world does that mean? Well, mentally, when you click the like or follow button, you think that you are standing on a mountaintop with the couple of thousand folks that are following you on social media and announcing, I love brand name. Now, realistically, we know nobody cares. Nobody's really paying attention. Your friends don't really care that if you've clicked like on Coke or Pepsi, but your brain does. And your brain then shifts to want to be consistent with that action. So any engagement that we can trick you into publicly amplifies that effect. So if we can get you to comment or leave a review or a rating, your brain rewires itself to remember that public commitment. So give you an example of how this has worked in the real world. We're going to chart you. This is auto insured carriers, and we worked in this space. And we're trying to illustrate the power of social media and the followership because of the creation of the commitment principle. So this is the number of Facebook fans by brand. And we're going to ask a handful of questions. We'll start with who are the retention leaders in this space. And the only variable we're going to give you is number of Facebook fans. Well, because I'm asking the question, you probably already surmised, well, it's the top three. The highest number of Facebook fans have the highest level of retention. Well, that's interesting, but maybe it's just coincidental. Well, so let's ask the question, who has the highest net promoter score? You will not be surprised to find that it is the same three, have the top three in net promotion score. Now, let's sanity check this, James. If I were to ask the public who is dead last in both net promoter score, who do you think it would be just based off of this?
Could it be Travelers?
Yeah, you got it. It's going to be Travelers. Now, you're probably wondering, no, Jake, this is probably related to like marketing spend, right? I've seen a bunch of farmers ads, and the answer again would be no. Geico is number one within the category by a pretty substantial margin, closely followed by Progressive Insurance. They both outspend their competitors by large margins, but it's not leading to retention and net promoter score. Now, this is a bilateral piece. People won't click the like button unless there's some actual affinity because the brain doesn't want you to say or write something publicly that you're not really behind. But once you do, it rewrites your memory. And it's the same mechanism of like when you go stay at a hotel. And when you check out, what's the one question they ask you?
How was your stay?
Yeah, right. And you're in a hurry. And so what do you answer? It was fine. It was good. Just I'm looking to check out. But what you don't realize is that they didn't write anything down. No matter what you say, if it was good, if it was bad, they're like, oh, that's great. Or, oh, we'll look into that. The reason they do that is when you say that it was good, it is literally rewriting your memory of the event so that you forget, oh, I had to wait a half hour after I checked in for my room to be ready. And there was a piece of trash in my trash can when I got in the room, and I didn't really like that because I was worried that the room wasn't clean. It's a very powerful effect in terms of how it affects our actual memory. You remember saying that the room was great, not that the room was actually great. And so it's a great way to combine these two concepts. So commitment principle tells us that your peak affinity is the moment you make a purchase decision. Consistency principle tells us that is the best time to ask, how was your experience? And so the really strong brands seek you out at that moment. They call you when you're in your hotel room right after check-in and say, hey, how are things going? They catch you just as you're leaving. How was your stay? They're sending you a link just after purchase. Hey, review us today. As you're leaving the doctor's office, the really successful brands out there will send you a survey immediately and ask, because that is the point of highest affinity. And your responses to that then cement in your memory of that overall experience when you're most likely to have high affinity. So taking these things and beginning to stack them gives us a methodology for how we can create high affinity and keep high affinity on an ongoing basis by leveraging existing pathways in the brain. So we've covered a whole lot of ground today. We have one or two moments here to get to questions. talking about the exposure effect, omnichannel marketing, the engagement principle, familiarity, commitment, and consistency. And we will answer a couple of questions, but before we go, I want to remind everybody, if you enjoy this content, we put out a lot of it. Dr. James puts out a column every other week on a psychology principle and how it applies to marketing, ongoing trends and studies. So follow us on any of the social media, and we'll make sure that you get ongoing versions of this. And we will post this video in the next couple of days so that you can review it and ask questions, or just send us some emails or comments on social media if we don't get to your questions today. The question I am sure that we are going to get most frequently, James, is where do I start? And that's always a challenging one. And the answer, is probably going to be slightly differently. But if you take some of these and you begin applying them, I think we'd say start where you were last year. Let's continue communicating with our ongoing customers. Let's think about when we have high affinity and find ways to engage them and reinforce that. Social media is a great place for it. And how do I get them thinking? Because when we do leverage these psychological drivers, we get higher affinity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we are bumping up against time, so I appreciate all of the interest and followership. James, any final words for our audience?
No, Jake, I think that about covers it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for your time. I appreciate the shorter format. As you have questions, send us a note, send us an email. Looking forward to catching up, and we'll catch you next time on the Intermark webinar. Thanks, everybody.